Metal Jesus, and I'm back again with a Star Wars video. As you guys know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, hence the t-shirt here. And there are billions and billions of Star Wars games out there. And I thought, you know what might be kind of fun is to cover some of the weirder or maybe the forgotten Star Wars games. These are games that, for whatever reason, good or bad, most gamers don't remember them, and probably for good reason. So not all these are hidden gems, but a few are. Let's take a look. Star Wars Super Bombad Racing. On the surface doesn't sound like such a bad idea. I mean, racing games in Star Wars is nothing new, but this one isn't that great. First of all, it's a kart racing game, and you know what? Back in the 2000s, it seems like every franchise out there had a kart racing game, and of course Star Wars had to get in on that. But what makes this kind of funky is that for some reason they went for the big bobbleheads. And so you can play as a bunch of Star Wars characters with these really big heads. It's kind of weird. But more than that, the game is kind of forgettable. I mean, it's not terrible, don't get me wrong. There are far worse Star Wars games, and we're gonna get to those. But this one just is kind of uninspired. Most of the tracks are really short and frankly kind of dull. Monopoly Star Wars is kind of a weird game I thought I would throw in here, and not many people remember it. I think what makes it weird is, well, quite frankly, it's a real estate game and Star Wars. I mean, those are typically two things that you don't really think would go together. What's surprising right off the bat is simply the quality of this game. The graphics are really sharp, animation's great, and also it includes scenes from a bunch of the movies. And so when you move around the board, it'll trigger scenes up in the left-hand corner. It's pretty awesome. You know, I was prepared to totally hate this game, and to my surprise, it's actually one of the better games in this video. What is not one of the better games in this video is the fighting game called Star Wars Masters of Terrace Kasi, or Cassie, or Kasai. Basically, this is a 3D fighting game back on the PlayStation 1 that basically tries to answer the question, what would happen if some of the main characters in all these Star Wars movies got to fight it out? For instance, what would happen if Boba Fett took on, let's say, Chewbacca? Or maybe a Tusken Raider took on Han Solo? But the question I needed answering was, what would happen if you took on brother and sister? Yes, I'm talking about Luke Skywalker versus Princess Leia. Well, I'll tell you what happens. Luke gets his little ass kicked by Princess Leia. It wasn't pretty. Star Wars Lethal Alliance is a PSP game that I recently picked up, and to my surprise, it's actually not that bad. This is a third-person shooting and platforming game that frankly really reminds me of some of the older Tomb Raider games. In this game, you play as a mercenary for hire that gets a job to try to find the plans for the original Death Star. This game actually takes place right before the events of Episode 4, A New Hope. As a matter of fact, fans who follow Star Wars lore and history closely will notice that this game actually ties into the first-person shooter called Dark Forces. In addition to all the third-person shooting and platforming, this game also throws in the occasional on-rails mission, and those are really fun. Actually, I wish that there was a little bit more of those. This game is actually pretty fun. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna lie, it's not like the best Star Wars game ever made or anything, but you know, it's a nice little side mission. So if you can find it for cheap, definitely pick it up. Star Wars Demolition answers the question, what would happen if you mix Star Wars and Twisted Metal? This game has you choosing from 10 different Star Wars vehicles of varying shapes and sizes. It's actually really cool. And then you battle it out in 8 big open arenas. The vehicles you can choose from are pretty crazy. For instance, you can get the typical ones like the land speeder, and then also maybe like, say, a pod racer. But then you have some more interesting ones like the AT-STs. Then you have snow speeders, and you can actually get on the back of a Rancor beast. And just like in Twisted Metal, you have power-ups that you drive over and special attacks and moves. This is actually a really fun game. I mean, it's probably one of my favorite in this entire video. It's pretty cool. Star Wars chess. Seems like it'd be a good fit. Well, guess what? It's not. I think I'd rather take a hammer to my nutsack than play this stupid game. Sure, it looks cool. I mean, this game came out in 1993, so, these are pretty decent graphics for the time. But dear God, it is so slow. Oh my God. Oh, what? It's painful. Seriously, I'd love to sit here and talk about the game and chess and the moves and the animations and... no, I can't do it. God, this game sucks. Yoda Stories is an old PC desktop adventure game that not a lot of people remember. This is kind of an odd game. I mean, even for Star Wars. Basically, it is a small little desktop game that you would play that's completely randomized. It's meant to, I think, be played in small chunks, almost kind of like a casual game. You play as Luke Skywalker, who starts the game down on Dagobah, and you immediately find R2-D2, who kind of helps you out, and then you go to Yoda, who gives you some sort of task. The tasks that Yoda gives you, and also the world that you play in, is completely different and randomized every single time. In one playthrough, you might end up on the ice planet of Hoth. In another one, maybe it'll take you to the moons of Endor or beyond. However, the problem with this game is that there really just isn't any depth. It's a total casual game, which I guess is probably the point, but frankly, most of the time you're just kind of bored playing it. Star Wars Force Commander is a real-time strategy game similar to others like Command & Conquer, Warcraft, and Total Annihilation. What set this game apart at the time was just the amazing 3D graphics in this. At the time, this was definitely one of its standout features. The game's story takes place between Episode 4, which is A New Hope, then also into Empire Strikes Back, and then finally at Return of the Jedi. In the first half of this game, you play as an Imperial officer of the Empire, which is actually really cool. I always like playing as the bad guys. However, halfway through the game, spoiler alert, you switch sides and start playing for the Rebellion. I guess this game started off as a 2D game, but then switched engines at the last moment to a 3D one. And you can tell that the developers just didn't have enough time to polish this title, unfortunately. For instance, it's really clunky to play. You can tell that the camera and also the interface just isn't quite where it needs to be. Also, this game is really buggy. So there are some of the weirder and forgotten Star Wars games that I have in my collection. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And a game that came out recently that is definitely on the weirder side, and that is Tiny Death Star. I'm actually been playing it on the iPad. And if you guys don't know about this game, it's really interesting. It's a pixel art Star Wars game that has you building out a Death Star. And basically it is how do you describe this game? It's like a time management kind of game, or maybe a resource management game where you're working for the Emperor. Darth Vader's your boss, and you're trying to build up the Death Star. It's actually a surprisingly interesting game. There's a lot of in-app purchases for it, so it's not perfect, but I've been enjoying it quite a bit. And like I said, who knows, maybe in 5 or 10 years we'll be doing a video about that game. If you like some of the more weirder and unusual Star Wars games, definitely check it out. Actually, I would love to know, what games did I miss on this list? Because like I said, there are billions of Star Wars games. What are some of the more interesting or weird or forgotten Star Wars games in your collection or that you know about? As always, I want to thank you for watching my channel, and thanks for subscribing. Take care.